Welcome back to the Everyday English Podcast, the show where we make the English language feel a little less scary and a lot more useful. I'm your host, Anne, and today I have a wonderful guest, William, an English communication coach who has spent years helping non-native speakers sound more natural, more confident, and most importantly, more respectful. William, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'm really glad to be here. This is actually one of my favorite topics, so I'm looking forward to this.
So, William, let's just jump right in. When we talk about polite English versus direct English, what exactly do we mean? Because I think a lot of people hear direct and they immediately think, oh, that means rude.
Yes, that's such a common misunderstanding. And honestly, it's one of the first things I address with my students. Being direct does not mean being rude. It simply means saying what you mean clearly without hiding it behind too many words. But here's the thing. There's a big difference between being direct and being blunt. Blunt is when you say something without any thought for the other person's feelings. Direct is when you're clear and considerate at the same time.
Okay, so give me an example, like a really simple, everyday example.
All right, let's say your colleague sends you a report and you think it needs improvement. A blunt response would be something like, "This is wrong, fix it." That's direct, yes, but it's also harsh. It has no warmth, no acknowledgement of effort.
Ouch. Yeah, I would not want to receive that message.
Exactly, nobody wants to receive that. Now, a polite but vague response might be, "Oh, this is interesting. Maybe we could, perhaps think about possibly adjusting a few things here and there." And the person reading that has absolutely no idea what you actually want them to change.
That's so real, though. I feel like I've written that email before. Perhaps we could possibly consider, and I meant, please redo this entire thing.
Yes, we've all been there. And the irony is that both of those responses, the blunt one and the overly vague one, actually fail the other person. One hurts them and the other confuses them. What we want is something in the middle. Something like, "Thank you for putting this together. I have a few suggestions that I think could make it even stronger. Would you be open to some feedback?" That's direct, it's kind, and it's respectful.
I love that. So there's a sweet spot, and that sweet spot is what we're really talking about today, how to find it. Now, William, I want to ask you something. Do you think people from certain cultures or language backgrounds have more difficulty with this than others?
That's a really insightful question, and yes, honestly, I do. It's not that some people are naturally ruder or naturally more vague. It's that every language has its own politeness system. In some languages, being very indirect is considered deeply respectful. You never say no directly, you never make a direct request. Everything is suggested or implied. And then when those speakers learn English, they carry that same style into English, and it can come across as confusing or even evasive.
Right. Like no doesn't always mean no in some cultures. It might just mean not right now or let's talk about it.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have speakers from languages where directness is a sign of honesty and respect. In some cultures, if you soften something too much, it's actually considered condescending, like you're talking to a child. And those speakers come into English and sometimes sound too blunt without realizing it.
So English kind of sits in the middle of this whole spectrum?
English, especially standard British or American English, has a very particular politeness culture. It values what we might call face-saving. You want to say what you mean, but you also want to protect the other person's dignity. And there are specific phrases and structures that do this really elegantly.
Okay, this is where I want to get practical. Can you walk us through some of those phrases? Because I feel like our listeners are sitting there going, okay, but what do I actually say?
Yes, let's get into the good stuff. So, one of the most powerful tools in polite English is the use of what we call hedging language. These are words and phrases that soften a statement without removing its meaning. For example, instead of saying, "You are wrong," you say, "I think there might be a slight misunderstanding here." Same message, but completely different feeling.
And the word might does a lot of heavy lifting there, doesn't it?
So much heavy lifting. Words like might, could, perhaps, possibly tend to, these are called modal verbs and hedges, and they are your best friends in polite English. They signal to the other person that you are not attacking them, that you're being thoughtful, that you're open to being wrong yourself. It creates psychological safety in the conversation.
Psychological safety. I like that. It makes me think about the workplace because this is such a huge issue there, right? Giving feedback, asking for things, disagreeing with your boss. These are all moments where people freeze up.
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk about asking for things, because that's huge. A lot of non-native speakers will say something like, "Give me the file." And in their home language, that's perfectly polite. It's just a normal imperative sentence. But in English, especially in a professional setting, that can sound quite demanding.
Yeah, I can imagine a boss or a colleague reacting to that and thinking, "Excuse me?"
Right. So instead, you have a few options. You can turn it into a question. Could you send me the file? You can add a softener. Would you mind sending me the file when you get a chance? Or you can explain the reason. I'm putting together the report. Could you send over the file? When you give a reason, even a simple one, people are far more likely to say yes, and they feel respected rather than ordered around.
It's amazing how one small change in wording can completely change the energy of a request. And I think the word please is interesting here too, right? Like, please is not enough on its own.
This is such a great point, Anne. Please is important, but it's not a magic word that fixes everything. Give me the file, please, still sounds quite abrupt. The please helps, but the overall structure of the sentence matters just as much, if not more.
So structure is everything.
Structure and tone work together. And this brings me to something I call the cushion technique. When you need to say something difficult, give criticism, say no, deliver bad news, you cushion it. You start with something positive or empathetic, then you say the difficult thing, then you end with something supportive or forward-looking. It's like a sandwich.
Oh, the feedback sandwich. I've heard of this.
Yes, and some people criticize it, saying it's too soft or that the real message gets lost. But when done well, when the cushions are genuine and not fake, it's extremely effective. It just requires you to be thoughtful about what you're saying, not just reactive.
Let's talk about saying no, because I think this is the hardest thing for a lot of people, especially people who are in cultures where saying no directly is just not done.
Saying no politely is an art form, honestly. And I think the most important principle is this. You can say no to the request without saying no to the person. You're not rejecting them. You are declining this specific thing at this specific time for this specific reason.
How do you put that into words, though?
So there are a few structures I teach. One is the appreciate but structure. I really appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not going to be able to take this on right now. Another is offering an alternative. I can't do that by Friday, but I could have it ready by Monday. Would that work? You're still saying no to the original ask, but you're showing goodwill.
And offering an alternative shows that you're still invested, that you care about helping them.
Exactly. It keeps the relationship intact. And in professional life especially, relationships are everything. Another useful one is simply being honest about the reason in a calm and clear way. I have a full schedule this week, and I wouldn't be able to give this the attention it deserves. That's honest, it's respectful, and it actually complements the work by saying it deserves real attention.
I love that framing. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that I think gets overlooked, and that's tone of voice and delivery. Because you can say all the right words and still come across as cold or dismissive if your tone is off. How does that play into everything?
Oh, this is so important, and it's actually where I spend a lot of time with my students, because language is only part of communication. The how matters just as much as the what. If you say, "I really appreciate your input" in a flat, bored voice, it sounds sarcastic. But if you say it with genuine warmth and eye contact, it lands completely differently.
So the words create the framework and the delivery brings it to life.
Beautifully put. And one specific thing I encourage people to do is slow down slightly when they're saying something important or something sensitive. Speed communicates a lot. When you rush, it can feel like you're dismissing the person, like you just want to get through the conversation and move on. When you slow down, it signals that you're present, that you're thinking carefully about what you're saying.
That's a great tip. And I imagine this takes practice, especially if you're used to speaking quickly in your first language.
It absolutely takes practice. I always tell people, record yourself. It sounds uncomfortable, and trust me, nobody enjoys hearing their own voice at first.
Oh, that is so true. I still cringe a little.
Right? But it's one of the most effective tools. When you listen back, you'll catch things you never noticed, where your voice drops, where you rush, where you sound more confident, and over time, you train yourself.
William, I want to ask you about a specific scenario that I think a lot of people face, which is disagreeing with someone in a meeting or in a group setting. This is really high stakes because you're in front of others and you don't want to embarrass anyone, but you also have something valid to say.
This is one of my favorite scenarios to workshop because the fear of this situation holds so many people back. They sit in meetings with a great idea or an important concern and they say nothing because they don't know how to disagree without seeming difficult.
And then they walk out feeling frustrated with themselves.
Completely. So the key principle here is to separate the idea from the person. You are not disagreeing with them as a person. You are offering a different perspective on an idea. And the language you use should make that clear. For example, instead of "that won't work," you say, "I see where you're coming from, and I want to raise a concern. What happens if we encounter this situation?" You're not dismissing their idea, you're extending the conversation.
So you're adding to the discussion rather than shutting something down.
Exactly. Another useful phrase is building on what you said, even when you're going in a slightly different direction. It's a bit of a social grace. It signals respect before you offer your alternative view, and people genuinely respond better to that.
What about when someone says something that's factually incorrect and you need to correct them? Because that's a delicate one, especially if it's a senior person or a client.
Yes, the classic "my boss is wrong, but how do I say that" situation. So the golden phrase here, one I use all the time, is "I just want to double check." For example, "just to make sure I have the right information, I had understood that the deadline was Thursday. Am I reading that correctly?" You're introducing the correction as a question, which gives the other person the chance to course correct without losing face.
Brilliant. You're not saying you're wrong. You're saying, let me make sure I have this right.
And that works 9 times out of 10. People will say, "Oh, you know what? I might have had that wrong. Let me check." And nobody's embarrassed. The information gets corrected. The relationship stays intact.
This is honestly so practical. I feel like I'm taking notes right now. Let me ask you something a bit more philosophical. Do you think being polite in English sometimes means being less authentic? Like, are you hiding who you really are behind all these softening phrases?
That's such a thought-provoking question, and I've had students ask me this. I think the short answer is no. I actually think the opposite is true. When you communicate skillfully and considerately, you are showing a more complete version of yourself. You're showing that you have emotional intelligence, that you care about the impact of your words, that you're not just thinking about yourself in the conversation.
So it's not about hiding yourself, it's about bringing more of yourself.
I think the most authentic version of a person is someone who is honest and kind, not one or the other. And polite English, done genuinely, is exactly that. It's the language of honest kindness.
I love that phrase, honest kindness. That should be on a poster somewhere.
I'll put it on a mug.
Please do. All right, William, we're coming toward the end of our time together, but I want to give you a chance to leave our listeners with maybe 2 or 3 things they can start doing today, practical takeaways they can actually use in their next conversation.
Absolutely. So the first thing is learn 3 softening starters and use them. Phrases like "I was wondering if," or "would it be possible to," or "I just wanted to check in about." These openers immediately set a polite, respectful tone and give you a few seconds to gather your thoughts before you get to the main message.
Love that. What's the second one?
Second, get comfortable with the word "could" instead of "can" for requests. "Can you help me?" is fine. "Could you help me?" is slightly more polite, slightly more considerate. It's a tiny change, but it signals respect. Same with "would." "Would you be available tomorrow?" rather than "are you available tomorrow?" Small word, big effect.
And the third?
Third, and this one is probably the most important, pause before you respond, especially in a difficult conversation. When someone says something that challenges you or surprises you, the instinct is to react immediately. But that's often when we say things that come out harsher than we intended. Give yourself 2 seconds, take a breath, and then respond. That 2-second pause is the difference between reacting and responding.
That's such wise advice, and I think it applies to so much beyond just English. It's really about being present in conversation.
Absolutely. Language is a tool, but presence is the foundation. When you're genuinely there with the other person, when you actually care about how they're receiving what you're saying, the right words follow naturally.
William, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I feel like every listener, whether they're a native speaker or learning English as a second or third language, has walked away with something really valuable today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Anne. This was a real pleasure. And to everyone listening, your words have power. Use them wisely, use them kindly, and never underestimate how much a thoughtful phrase can change someone's day.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Everyday English podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with someone who could use a little more confidence in their conversations. Until next time, keep speaking, keep learning, and be kind with your words. Take care, everyone.